We'd like to welcome everyone who's joining us. We're just going to wait a few minutes and then we'll start in about 3 minutes. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. It's 5 p.m. Eastern time, and thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar. My name is Fatima Iqbal. I'm a financial planner with Azad Asset Management, and we also have Mohi Khwaja joining us. He is the co-founder and Director of Philanthropy and Development at the American Muslim Community Foundation. So again, thank you for joining us. We hope you'll gain some good information out of this. So just to get started, we want to give you a little bit of background on who we are at Azad Asset Management in case you haven't heard of us before. We do know a lot of our clients are joining us as well. At Azad, our philosophy really follows our ethical investing criteria, and this is really based on the principles of economic and social justice. So while that's one of our main philosophies, again, making sure that all of our products and services fall within halal and Sharia compliant investing, we also have developed portfolios that are designed to meet our clients' long-term goals. Our mission since 1997 has really been to provide investment services, again, designed to help our clients enjoy that optimum performance without compromising their values. So we again provide all of our investment following the higher standards in Sharia compliance. One of the unique aspects of our investment strategy is that we find vetted institutional money managers who again are specialized in managing the portfolios for you. We also combine that with personal financial advisors who are again specialized and also personally committed to halal financial strategies. And we also work with you to make sure that your investment is aligned both with your goals and also with your risk tolerance. So at a glance, we were founded in 1997. As of last year, we managed about 812 million assets under management, and alhamdulillah, we're on track to hitting $1 billion by the end of this year. Our clients are nationwide, so we are fortunate to have relationships all the way from Maine to California. And again, same thing with our institutional portfolio managers. We really search for the best portfolio managers around the country who, again, can provide high-level expertise and quality portfolio management for our clients without compromising those Sharia values. In terms of our process, a lot of people often wonder, is halal just a label? Is Sharia compliance just a label? But in fact, what we do is we follow the rules for Sharia governance, which is established by an organization called AOFI, which is the Accounting and Auditing Organization for Islamic Financial Institutions. And we layer our Sharia compliance not only to follow AOFI guidelines, but we also have an internal AOFI certified Sharia auditor, an active Sharia advisory board, and also we have a third-party independent Sharia auditor who audits our firm for Sharia compliance every year. For us, halal really is not just a label. We really like to dive deep into really understanding what that means and making sure we can provide that value to our clients. So we follow what we call the 7 tenets of halal investing, which starts, of course, with screening and filtering companies, but it doesn't stop there. We continue an ongoing due diligence process for our managers. We screen regularly on a monthly basis for our investment portfolios to make sure they stay aligned with halal investment guidelines. We also engage in shareholder advocacy, which means that we reach out to companies we feel can be doing better in areas of social or economic justice. And we also calculate purification and zakah for our clients. So that actually brings us to the main topic of our presentation today, which is talking about planned charitable giving. And again, we've been very fortunate to be able to work with our clients who are highly philanthropic, and donor advised funds have been a great tool that a lot of our clients have been able to use in enabling themselves to give and in a better way. So just to kind of highlight briefly how a donor advised fund works. A donor advised fund is a nonprofit entity where you can donate funds, either cash or you can donate assets like appreciated shares into the donor advised fund at any time throughout the year. Now, when you make that donation, you will get an upfront tax deduction for that year. So even though we're at the end of 2020, if you contribute to a donor advised fund before December 31st, you'll be able to get that upfront tax deduction for the year 2020. The unique aspect of a donor advised fund, however, is that once you make the contribution, you are not obligated to make the grants to the charitable organization immediately. So you can actually wait. You can wait for those funds to be invested and grow further. And you can also then give to charities based on your choosing, and yet you've already aligned the tax deduction that you need for your own personal planning. So it's a great tool to align your personal tax planning along with your charitable giving. And it's another way to amplify your giving. So for example, if you've donated appreciated shares, maybe you bought a share for $5. Now it's $10 and you've held it more than 1 year. When you donate it, you get to take a deduction of $10. And now let's say you leave it in that donor advised fund and let it grow now to $15 and you make a grant. Now you've given $15. Essentially, the $10 in gain has been tax-free, or you've either got a deduction or tax-free growth, and only $5 was actually what you put in. So again, the idea of how can you donate or improve or enhance your charitable giving in a smarter way. So a donor advised fund is a great tool for that. So the benefits here is that the donor advised fund can provide a lot of the benefits that a private foundation will give you without having to go through the legal creation of a foundation, the administration, and the annual accounting costs. You're still able to fast forward that tax deduction to the year where you contribute to the fund. You can let that money grow tax-free, and you can still retain the ability to make grant requests to the donor advised funds, to the charities that you choose. And again, this can be honored for almost all 501c3 public charities. Another great advantage of a donor advised fund is that the donor advised fund will actually do the due diligence to make sure that your contribution is going to a charity that is properly registered. And also another thing is you can also donate to a donor advised fund either in the name of your own fund. So if you want to come up with a creative name for your fund, you can do that. If you want to give anonymously, this is another way you can do that. And finally, if you also just want to create a legacy for your family, you can name the fund after the name of your family, and again, create a tool for you to be able to give and also an opportunity for your family to participate through that. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Mohi Khwaja. Again, Mohi is the co-founder and director of development and philanthropy at the American Muslim Community Foundation. So Mohi, please take it from here.
Thank you so much for the warm introduction, Fatima, and everyone at the Azad Asset Management team. Really thank you for partnering on today's event. So great to see everyone who's joined today and who's registered for the event. So a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Michigan and grew up in the Canton, Michigan community and went to the University of Michigan, got involved in nonprofits right away, was a development manager at various nonprofits and ended up working at American Red Cross for 5 years as well as a major gift officer. So my background has been in this space, and when I was at the Red Cross, I wanted to still be active in the Muslim community and lend my skill set to help the Muslim community grow in charitable giving and be more strategic about philanthropy. And if you think of all of the good that you want to do, all of the charity that you want to give, you can do that through a community foundation. So the main benefit of the donor advised funds that Fatima has been so eloquently talking about is that you can consolidate all of your giving up front, and you get one tax receipt once you make that contribution. So if you think, 2020, you've given to like a dozen different charities, but now going forward, if you open up a donor advised fund, all of your giving will be to the DAF first. So you get the deduction and receipt from our community foundation, and then you pass it on to any charities of your choice going forward. So it's about consolidating, it's about being more strategic. It helps you review offers from other nonprofits to engage them. And really that's our role as a community foundation. We are a public nonprofit, an entity that allows you, the community, to review and engage with nonprofits that we serve and donate to from you to the nonprofits. So just wanted to share a little bit of the background about AAMCF. Our vision is leading sustainable and strategic Muslim philanthropy for today and future generations. Our mission is to cultivate donor giving and diversify funding to advance charitable causes. And we do this by being sacred, strategic, sustainable, collaborative, diverse, inclusive, and do it all with integrity. So when I started American Muslim Community Foundation with 3 other co-founders, we got together and looked across the United States, and there was no single community foundation for the Muslim community by the Muslim community. There were other partnerships with leading institutions across the country already, but nothing that was grassroots, nothing that connected the principles of zakat and sadaqah from an institutional level to families and the causes that they care about. So there was a really big opportunity across the country to do something big, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that journey as well. So in 2016, we got started. We developed our mission and vision, which you just heard about. We got our 501c3 status. We built a strategic plan, and pretty much from 2017, we have been implementing that strategic plan. And we are now just at our 5-year mark almost. And it's been really great to see how we've started and what we've been able to accomplish in the last 4.5 years. So, we focused first on donor advised funds, then we added in grant making, then we added in endowment services and fiscal sponsorship and giving circles. So every year we entered into a new service area for the community. And to date, we've been able to now give over $3 million. We've had 3 grant cycles. We operate 8 giving circles and 13 fiscal sponsorships and 6 endowments. So this has really been a community-led effort from the very beginning, and we're continuing to grow with the community support. And I actually left the Red Cross full-time in 2019 to focus on AAMCF full-time now. So I just briefly mentioned some of these core services, and we're here to talk about donor advised funds, so I'll save that description for last. But giving circles are pretty much a group of family or friends who come together and they give to a pooled fund that AAMCF would manage for them. And then once the giving circle decides who they want to distribute to, we will then give on behalf of that giving circle to the charities of their choice. This helps with reporting to the giving circle admins of who's given and how much is given, instead of having to, screenshot your credit card statement and share that with your group of friends. This is just a cleaner process to make all of that work well. And we're actually launching a national American Muslim Women's Giving Circle later this month, and hopefully before Ramadan it'll fully be functioning. And we have similar giving circles like Interfaith Confronting Hate, or some individuals have their own family members that they give together and they play fantasy football together, and whoever wins the season gets to decide what charity the funds go to. So you can get really creative, you can create your own way to give together. And then for nonprofit organizations, we set up endowments, and many of you are familiar with that. Obviously, it's a principle of money that the nonprofit would provide. We would invest it on their behalf and then provide them the return of investment. And we can help nonprofit organizations do this a lot more effectively. Instead of having them set up their own 501c3, recruit their own board, get an endowment committee together, we can manage that process for them by partnering with them on that. And fiscal sponsorship is when a nonprofit, they may not have their 501c3 status yet. They applied to the IRS, but now with COVID, the IRS is taking up to a year to respond to new nonprofit entities. So in that interim period, or if it's just a project that doesn't want to be its fully functioning nonprofit, but they want to get good work done, we can collect the donations on their behalf, give the receipts to their donors, and then pass on the funds to the project. So there's a lot of different ways in which AAMCF is unique, and we offer these services to the community to grow. So just very briefly, some of the programs that we offer: we have a podcast, be sure to check it out. It's called Muslim Philanthropy Podcast. We just wrapped up our first ever Muslim Philanthropy Awards at our annual symposium last month with Hassan Minhaj. And we had Lifetime Achievement Awards, Corporation Awards, Nonprofit Awards, Volunteer Fundraiser Awards, and so on. So you can still take a look at that on our website. We offer webinars and consulting for nonprofits. We ran an 8-webinar program called the Social Impact Accelerator, where we had hundreds of nonprofit leaders attend different topics, from starting your own nonprofit to telling your story in marketing, to engaging your donors, recruiting your board, creating a strategic plan. All of these know-how topics that empower nonprofit organizations and provide capacity building and leadership development. And we also have a professional development fund, because as you may know, a lot of nonprofits can hire their staff, but they don't provide additional benefits such as professional development. So we have a fund that nonprofits can apply to, and you can give to that scholarship fund through AAMCF to help empower more nonprofit leaders. Then we have what's called the Muslim Philanthropic Values. You can use the set of cards by Muslim Productive Company, their Baraka Culture cards, and review what values that are tied to the Islamic faith empower and motivate your charitable giving. So it's a unique way for donor advised funds and giving circles to talk more about charitable giving. And as you know, zakat is one of the 5 pillars, and Hajj and the Shahada and fasting and praying are all congregational. So there's no reason why zakat should be this private concept that we do on our own. It should really be about empowering and bringing the community together and talking about how we can use our zakat and sadaqah to motivate more charitable giving. So, you know, we started back in 2016, and some of the things that we've been able to do, I mentioned earlier, but we now have, as of yesterday, 88 donor advised funds. We have around 500 nonprofits in our nonprofit directory. We've given over $3 million. Earlier this year, we had a COVID-19 response fund for nonprofits that gave out $360,000, of which $260,000 went to mosques. And 100,000 went to other nonprofit organizations. And the charitable giving that we do, it goes to Muslim-led institutions and also other nonprofit organizations outside of our faith community, because as Muslims, we care about the local food bank, we care about the local hospital, we care about the free health clinic, and we care about the domestic violence shelter and so many other causes that may not be Muslim-led institutions, but we care about our local community and want to showcase that support. So when you as an individual are writing your checks or filling out credit card forms online and making your donations, you're inspired by your faith to do that. But as an individual, they may not know that you're giving on behalf of your Muslim faith. But when you set up a donor advised fund at American Muslim Community Foundation and we make that ACH transfer to them and they see on their statement that it's coming from the American Muslim Community Foundation on behalf of you, that clearly shows that the Muslim community cares about their causes. So, you know, in terms of what motivates a donor and donating today, we know that there are so many different ways to give, but a lot of the options are inefficient. When you attend a fundraiser, oftentimes it's uncomfortable, it's long, it's drawn out. You already know what amount you want to give, so you don't need to wait through them asking for $100,000 all the way down to $500 when to give. So a donor advised fund allows you to be more strategic. It allows you to plan your giving ahead of time, and it allows you to be selective of the different types of charities you want to support. So these are the different motivating factors of why people give. It's because of the mission of the organization. It's the desire and need to want to make a difference. It's the personal satisfaction that you receive in knowing that you're helping somebody else. A lot of it comes down to family values and your upbringing. Maybe you were more motivated by somebody's personal story of how the nonprofit helped them. It's of course identified by our faith and our friends, who's giving to what other causes, and of course the tax benefits behind it. But some of the reasons why people don't give is because they were never asked, or they think that their gift doesn't matter to the organization anymore. And hopefully this is something that we can achieve by getting over, is the lack of trust with institutions, not knowing how their funds are being allocated or used. So financial transparency is very big. So we want to make sure that when you give through your donor advised fund, we are vetting all of the nonprofit organizations that are in our nonprofit directory. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later. So this study is actually done by the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, ISPU, and they did a report on American Muslim philanthropy. And AAMCF sponsored that report, but some of the things that they found out were the left side of the graph is the general public, and the right side of the graph is the Muslim community. So if you're looking at some of those main motivating factors of why people give, it's because the feeling of those that have more should help those who have less. It's of course religious obligation, and that giving makes them feel good. And this other category that seems to be a majority as well is the commitment to help other people. It's the desire to help those in need, no matter their gender or race or religion. It's about social justice. It's being asked to give from your peers to be able to have a lasting legacy. So many different factors play into this. And one of the most interesting things that came out of that research, at least for me, was that Muslims are just as likely to give to Muslim causes or Muslim-led initiatives than they are to initiatives outside of our faith community. So, you know, whether it's the American Cancer Society, the American Red Cross, Doctors Without Borders, they're all doing fantastic work. And Muslims are just as likely to give to those causes. Sure, they might be giving more to their local mosque, their local school, their care chapter, and so on and so forth, but they're just as likely to give to these causes that are led outside of our faith community as well. So, you know, obviously throughout the Quran, there's so many times where zakat or sadaqah are mentioned, and it's paired with salah, right? So we know that this is something that is vital and critical to our faith, that if we want to give, we do it with the intent that we will be rewarded. We do it with the intent that it will be of benefit to the person receiving it. We do it with the benefit and thought in mind that when it comes to the day of judgment, we will have these good deeds on our side, and that it could act as a shade on the day of judgment for us. So across the Muslim community in the United States, the ethnic breakdown is that there's no significant majority. We know that the Muslim community is 34% Asian, it's 26% Arab, it's 25% Black, it's 8% Hispanic, and 7% white or mixed. And we saw this general election that there were more than 750,000 registered Muslim voters. We know that there are over 2,000 mosques in the United States, many of which were built in the last decade. We know that according to the IRS, there are more than 5,500 nonprofit organizations registered as Islamic, and these include more than 300 schools that are either part-time or full-time with over 40,000 students across the country. So these are some of the demographics, and when you think of the giving power of the Muslim community, there's also research that shows on the next slide that the American Muslim community has over $124 billion of disposable income, that there are more than 3.75 million Muslims across America, that Muslims are the second largest non-Christian group in over 20 states. So, you know, it's great that Azad Asset Management has thousands of clients across the country, that they're approaching $1 billion of assets under management, and that your community is such a vital and integral part of the American Muslim story. And how can you now use those assets, use those resources to benefit the rest of the American Muslim community as well, and also the general US public? Because again, American Muslims care about the well-being of our neighbors and institutions, and we want to contribute philanthropically to support all of that ecosystem. And that's how AMCF can help you do that. A few stats from giving in 2019. This is done by the Giving USA, which is part of Indiana University. And they stated that in 2019, $450 billion was donated. Again, $450 billion. That's a crazy amount. And 70% of that, about $310 billion, came from individuals. So don't think that your giving is insignificant, right? You are a majority of charitable giving in the United States. And if you look at that other number, 10% of bequests. So if you set up a trust, and Fatima can help you do that, working with estate planning lawyers, right? If you can go back to that, thank you. So if you set up a trust, you can leave in your will a certain amount of money to charitable causes. If you do already have a private family foundation, you can still give or set up a donor advised fund to pair well with that. And same thing with the trust that you establish. You can pair that with a donor advised fund. And there's a lot of benefits even for corporations. If you have a small business, you can give and receive certain deductions as well. So what I want to talk to you specifically about, and I want you to go and talk to your financial advisors, your CPAs, your wealth managers, ask them about the CARES Act, because the CARES Act expanded charitable cash contributions and allows you to give significantly more in 2020 than it has in the past. As you know, in 2019 and years previously, you could give up to 60% of your individual adjusted gross income if you were an individual. If you were a business, you could give 10% of your adjusted gross income. But the CARES Act for 2020 specifically said that before the end of this year only, you can actually give 100% of your adjusted gross income in cash. You can actually give 25% as a business of your adjusted gross income. So there's a lot more flexibility with giving cash this year. Now, of course, if you have appreciated assets, that's a fantastic way to give. And you can still, if you exceed your adjusted gross income in charitable giving, you can carry that over year to year up to 5 years. So these are all great ways for you to contribute and make a difference. And you can use your charitable giving in 2020 for the rest of your life through a donor advised fund, and then pass that lump sum on to charities when you pass, or give the authority of making decisions to your children as well. So there's a lot of benefits to donor advised funds and the unique opportunity that the CARES Act provides for you to make a you've been doing your charitable giving. So we just went over how this has now changed in 2020, and definitely something for you to, again, ask your CPA, ask your financial advisor about these things and how you can use your assets and your cash to make the most of the CARES Act. So now, when it comes to a donor advised fund, there are a few things at AMCF that we require. If you go to Schwab or Fidelity or Vanguard or all of these financial institutions, they're going to have their own criteria. And oftentimes it's a minimum of $5,000, $10,000, $25,000, even $250,000 at some of these other institutions to open up a donor advised fund. But that research from Giving USA that talked about Americans giving $450 billion, one of the key research points they said and pointed out was that the average charitable household in the United States gives about $3,000 a year. So AMCF, as a grassroots community foundation, wanted to flip the script, wanted to bring this donor advised fund and this best practice to the Muslim community at a level that was accessible. Now, alhamdulillah, many of you can easily afford to set it up at $2,500. But again, think of the maximum contribution you can make in 2020 to take advantage of the CARES Act in setting up your donor advised fund by the end of this year. If you want to commit appreciated assets, we ask that you try to initiate all transfers to us by December 11th so that we have enough time before the end of the year to make sure that we receive and allocate those assets properly. If you're making a cash contribution, you can do that on our website or mail in a check or however you'd like by the 31st of the year. So we ask that when you open up your donor advised fund, you start with a minimum of $2,500 and you also commit to using your donor advised fund for a minimum of 5 years. When you make your distributions to other nonprofit organizations, they have to be $100 or more. And the annual fees, I believe, are listed as well. So on the next slide, you'll see that if you start your donor advised fund with under $500,000, you will be charged 0.65% annually or $125, whichever is greater. So pretty much if you're at $20,000 or below, it'll be $125 a year. If you are more than $20,000 up to the first $500,000, it'll be 0.65%. And this is competitive across the market. So if you went to Fidelity or you went to Chase or Schwab or Vanguard, you will see similar fees. But the issue is those institutions don't understand zakat as well as we do. They don't have a connection to the Muslim nonprofits like we do. And a significant thing that even CARE did a report on was that a lot of these institutions, since they're servicing thousands of other clients, their values may not represent your values as well. So they're actually funding some institutions that are, at the end of the day, are Islamophobic. And since they are a nonprofit organization, they pass the vetting of these other institutions. But since AMCF takes a closer look, we will not fund any hate groups at all. So that is our commitment to making sure that whatever funds the Muslim community gives to AMCF, that we are distributing also in a fashion that meets our values as well. And then, of course, reminded again by the verse in the Quran that never will you attain good until you spend in the way of Allah from which you love. And whatever you spend, indeed, Allah is knowing of it. So a reminder that this life that we live and the comfort that money can provide us and the way in which we utilize our assets is going to benefit us at the end of the day. Are we using the responsibility that we have for what we own and making sure that we have a will created so that our assets will pass on to our kinfolk and to the nonprofits that we love in a method that is according to our religious practice? So these are all things that I implore you to look into. And, you know, we want to make sure that you understand that the values that we have and that we understand about sadaqah and zakat and awqaf are implemented at our organization in everything that we do. So I want to touch briefly on giving circles, and we talked about them being a group of family or friends coming together. So once you set up your donor advised fund, it's very easy to participate in a giving circle at AMCF as well. And if you have a donor advised fund, there's no additional fees in your gifts to the giving circle. But giving circles are open to the public, and if they don't have a donor advised fund with us, they either have a 5 or a 10% fee associated with the giving circle as well. So if AMCF is doing all the administrative work of taking meeting minutes, setting up Zoom calls, and reviewing the charities for you and doing all the legwork, that's the 10% fee structure. If your giving circle has a few leaders from your friends and groups that are playing more of an admin role, then it's only a 5% structure. So like I said, we're setting up the American Muslim Women's Giving Circle. We're recruiting members for the Interfaith Giving Circle. And we have a few other giving circles that are set up across the country that have been giving for the last few years. So if giving circles are something that are new to you, I highly recommend you look into it and encourage your friends or families to give together to the causes that you love. So we talked about the research and vetting that we do for nonprofit organizations. And anytime a family wants to make a distribution from their donor advised fund or their giving circle, they notify AMCF. So at that point, we check and see if that nonprofit is in our directory. If they're already in our directory, we make the ACH transfer to the charity. If the organization isn't in our nonprofit directory yet, we have a form on our website that the nonprofit can fill out, and then we review those on a monthly basis when we make our distributions, and we add them to the directory at that point. So in that vetting process, we want to make sure that does the charity have their state forms, federal forms all in a row? Who is on their board? Do they have strong governance? And are they? And we'll look at their Charity Navigator score or Guide Star score to make sure that they're being fiscally responsible as well. So any organization that receives funding from us, we actually have a one-on-one conversation with them about how they make an impact. So we go a step further, right? A lot of these places like Fidelity and Schwab and other institutions that have donor advised funds and are doing charitable giving are only checking to see, are they an active 501c3 with the IRS? And if they are, then they'll give them the funding. So we go a little bit further in making sure that the charities you want to support are in compliance at the state level, the federal level, and have a proper plan in place on how to implement the projects that you want to support. And if you are giving a restricted gift for a water well project in a developing country, we will make sure on your behalf that those funds are used accordingly. So each nonprofit receives a report of, were the funds for a zakat, were the funds for a specific project, and who it's coming from and the amount, so they can reconcile at the end of every month. And also, if you, again, want to remain anonymous, we provide that for you as well. And one of the other things is, if let's say you have $20,000 that you want to distribute annually, we can create a grant cycle where we do a request for proposals. You can be very specific and say, I only want to fund organizations that are operating in my hometown or my state or my region, and they focus on feeding the hungry or a domestic violence shelter. And then we can do a request for proposals so that nonprofit organizations can apply, and then you can learn about more projects. So there are a lot of benefits to partnering with AAMCF. So we ask you to join the social impact and make the most of your charitable giving for the rest of your life by setting up a donor advised fund today. And we all know there's a hadith that says the deeds most loved by Allah are those that are done regularly, even if they are small. So this is a great way for you to put funds into a donor advised fund and let your zakat and sadaqah be more strategic through a donor advised fund. So just a little background on AAMCF. Over the last few years, our operating budget has been around $150,000 to $250,000. We hope that by next year and by 2022, we scale to 1,000 donor advised funds, that we establish our own $5 million endowment, and that we ourselves have more than $10 million of asset under management. So even just thinking about Azad Asset Management here, when you guys reach that $1 billion number of assets under management, even if you had 1% or 0.5% of those assets dedicated to charitable giving, we would be able to do so much together and empower the community on your behalf. And there's so much potential in your network, in your spheres of influence, that you can tell a friend or two about the CARES Act, about donor advised funds. So we definitely encourage you to help us grow by word of mouth.
Thank you so much, Mohi. That was a lot of great information. We'd like to encourage anybody who has questions, please go ahead and type it into the chat box, and then we'll try to get your question answered. Mohi, just, it was great learning about donor advised funds, about the social impact. In terms of donor advised funds, one of the concerns I sometimes hear is, they'll say, well, if I give my money to a donor advised fund, I no longer have control. It's like a complete gift, an irrevocable gift. What if the organization, what if the donor advised fund doesn't give the money to the organization I request? What would you say to that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and definitely one of the most common questions that we have. So I will say that since 2017, when we started our donor advised funds, we've made over 1,300 transactions to add up to that $3 million. And in all of our experience working with the 87 families, we've only run into one nonprofit organization out of 300 that have been funded by us that hasn't filled out the form yet. And they're more than welcome to fill out the form still, and we'll gladly fund that nonprofit organization. So it's a very small percentage, 99% of the time, your charity that you want to support will fill out the form on your behalf, and we will gladly fund them should they pass our screening process. A few red flags that kind of came up in development, as you may know, churches and mosques and synagogues don't need to file 990 statements, but they still will create financial statements for their general members. But the issue at hand was there was a nonprofit organization that filed as a mosque that never holds prayers at their facility. They're not a mosque at all. So that to us was a red flag. We'd let the donor know, and they said, I'm grateful that you found that out, but I'd still like to fund them. So we ended up still funding that institution. But it was a red flag because they should be disclosing their financial information and not be submitting to the IRS that they're a mosque when they do other work and don't hold daily congregational prayers. So little odd things like that. We also found out that there was a charity that, although they had their state registration, they didn't have their federal registration, and they were accepting gifts and hadn't even filed for their IRS 1023. So that was definitely a red flag. So then we told them, we'll only fund you until you submit your IRS 1023 form. So those are the types of things that we uncover when we do our due diligence and screening process.
Well, that sounds great, not only for the donor, but for the organizations too, because maybe they inadvertently miss something and
Right.
might get caught later. So in some ways, it sounds like you're doing a favor to those organizations too.
Definitely. And we have a nonprofit resource center. We have articles of incorporations and bylaw templates and resources that we can share to help make our community organizations stronger.
We have a question that came in about sending DAF contributions to overseas charities.
Mm-hmm.
Have you supported any overseas charities, or how do you support overseas projects?
I love this question. And in the beginning, in 2017 and 2018, and even 2019, we didn't do international gifts just because there's a few more restrictions, especially when you want to make it an IRS tax deductible donation to an internationally registered charity. So, obviously we support US-based charities that are doing work internationally. But finally this year we partnered with Charity Aid Foundation, and they handle the vetting process specifically for international charities. So you can still make a contribution from your donor advised fund to international charities, but there are additional fees for that specific partnership. So on top of our fees, it would be a 5% transaction per whichever international charity you want to fund. And that goes straight to Charity Aid Foundation, who does that international transaction for us. And the timeline takes about a month for the nonprofit to receive that funding. So, when the Lebanon blast happened in Beirut, we worked with the Lebanese Red Cross and a few other international organizations to make sure that the families who have donor advised funds could contribute to help that cause specifically and give to the Lebanese Red Cross, in addition to the thousands of dollars that they may have gave to other organizations working in the US and helping there directly.
That's great. We have another question about zakat eligibility, and definitely it's a question we get a lot too at Azad. We calculate the zakat and purification for our clients, and a lot of times people ask, can I give my zakat to a donor advised fund? So I'll let you answer the question, please.
Yeah, so the best answer is always ask a imam or a financially religious scholar who has a far better understanding than I myself personally do. But what I've heard is, of course, there's differences of opinion. So if you ask somebody like Imam Tahir, who takes a more conservative approach, or you ask somebody like Joe Bradford who takes a more liberal approach, you'll get different answers. But the way that we do this is whatever zakat you want to distribute out, right? When you calculate your zakat, you have a year to distribute it, right? So if you're thinking of calculating your zakat before the end of this year, you have until next year to then distribute that amount. But if you wanted to calculate your zakat in Ramadan and then give it from a year from there, you can donate your zakat to your donor advised fund. You can hold on to it there. Some of the scholars will say you can invest it further. Others will say leave it as cash. So whatever method you choose to do, you can, the overall answer is yes, you can donate your zakat to AAMCF and your donor advised fund. And AAMCF itself is a zakat eligible charity because we are one of the 8 categories of administering and managing zakat. So whether you want to gift more zakat to AAMCF, you can do that, or you can indicate you want to distribute your zakat from your DAF to other zakat eligible charities. So you have more flexibility with the donor advised fund to distribute your zakat.
Right. And the question that we often get is, even if my zakat is due, can I prepay it? And definitely that's what we were talking about before, where you're aligning, your zakat payments maybe with your tax planning. You know that typically every year you need to give a certain amount of zakat. You can align it by prepaying it, either putting it into a DAF, and we'll work with you to understand what the investment should be. Because again, you don't want to take substantial risk for zakat that is due, that likely would need to stay in cash. But any amount that you anticipate that you will need in the future that you can take some risk with, you could use the donor advised fund. Once you make the contribution to the donor advised fund, it is an irrevocable gift and you cannot take it back. So the money that you put into the DAF actually is no longer zakatable to you, essentially. So it can be a tool that can be used, and we've helped a lot of clients do that. So definitely, if anybody has questions, we'll be happy to talk to your advisor. We're happy to kind of talk to you about how it can be a tool, again, to align the giving, which you already are inshallah going to be doing, but in a way that is also advantageous for you from a planning perspective.
Definitely. And many of you, if you are going to be moving your appreciated assets from Azad Asset Management to AAMCF, we have a folio account that is set up with Azad Asset Management, so it's easy to transfer those assets. And then when you want to make a deduction or a distribution to a charity, at that point, AAMCF would then distribute it, and it would be transferred from Azad as well. So we're working together on helping Azad Asset Management clients specifically set up donor advised funds.
All right, well, thank you so much, Mohi. I don't think there's any more questions. This presentation will be available and be sent out to everybody who registered. If you do have any other questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to me. Mohi, I'm sure the same is for you. But again, we appreciate everyone joining us for this event. We hope that it was beneficial, and inshallah, we hope to talk to you soon. Take care.
Likewise. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.